You were an art director on Call of Duty.
We know how to make the gunplay fun.
Top 3 skills that you got working on a multi-billion-dollar franchise.
We used procedural tools to actually block out all of our trees, block out all of our vistas.
Anything that you could share that recreate that experience without actually going to the army?
We scan a lot of our materials and we scan a lot of our props.
If you're introducing something, there's going to be a huge hating backlash on everything.
This moment's happening, you're just like, yes, let's go.
Hi everyone, my name is Ninali Anderson. I'm CEO of Devoted Studios and I'm your host at Devoted SpeakEasy. If you like the stuff that we do, please like, subscribe, share, and I hope you learn something cool every time you watch this episode. We have an amazing guest tonight, Shaun Bell. Hi, Shaun.
Hi. How you doing?
If someone doesn't know Shaun, besides spending a big portion of his career at Treyarch and recently at Bonfire, biggest part of his career he spent at Treyarch working on multi-billion-dollar franchise Call of Duty. If you don't know, Shaun got his fingers on Call of Duty Black Ops Cold War, Black Ops 3, and Black Ops 2, and a bunch of other cool titles. So I can't wait to learn more. And now Shaun is kickstarting a totally new studio. So I wonder what he is cooking there. So without further ado, I would love to dive in your tremendous experience on the Call of Duty franchise. It's obviously one of the most iconic franchises in the industry. You were an art director on the several games there. In one of your interviews, you mentioned that it was moving like from high school to an NBA league. How did your journey start at Treyarch? And how was it different from your previous experiences?
So I've been in the industry for a minute now, like over 20 years. And at that time, I was working before Treyarch. I worked at another smaller studio. You feel like you're a big fish when you're at a small studio because you have your hands in everything. And I moved to Treyarch to, step into like the AAA space. It was definitely like coming from high school, LeBron James type of thing, feeling really good, and then getting into the NBA and then getting punched around by people that are super talented, that's on top of their game, that's been running at full speed.
Yeah, and Treyarch specifically has a very interesting kind of notion about it on the industry of being like a super well-oiled machine running at 24/7 full speed. I can only imagine the culture shock that you had moving there.
Extreme culture shock.
You're sitting around with all these talented people, and not only are they good, they're fast, they know what they're talking about. And it was just one of those opportunities that you realize, oh, you don't know as much you thought you knew. And then once you get there, you really start seeing the lay of the land of just being a good communicator, being a good artist, inspiring artists, motivating them, getting them to align under a vision. It's just different tools that you learn from a smaller studio to a bigger studio. But once you're in there and once you get your sea legs behind you, you really start to realize how all the different teams, not only in their own disciplines, but just how to get them organized and motivated and what stuff they actually need to be successful, because each discipline needs something different. And how you communicate to them. So it was definitely one of those things where when you're in a smaller team, you can do a bunch of different things and you can talk to a bunch of different people.
What are the, top 3 skills that you got out of working on Call of Duty that you can deploy in your new studio that you're building?
One is just starting to develop a vision, really understanding what that actually looks like, how to be able to formulate your thoughts, being able to across all the different disciplines, really writing up and not only writing but visually putting your thoughts together. Next one is definitely being able to communicate that clearly, being able to onboard people onto where they're at. One from being junior artists all the way up to senior artists, so being able to communicate that clearly. And then also just also evangelizing that outwards to in my situation right now is to investors and things like that. And the last skill is really trying to having a pulse on what are some of the new tools, what do we need to do to actually be efficient, and how to organize the team. Yeah.
I know that while working on Call of Duty, you were deeply immersed in building maps, right? And can you tell me more on how the process is organized? Who brings ideas for the maps? How do you approve them? Is there a lot of collaborations with designers and level artists and level designers?
When you take a step back and we look at like what the project's about, every year we're trying to reinvent what we're doing, and then also like just push forward and come up with something new. But we do have a couple of key staples that we build off of. And it's one of it is definitely having that globetrotting. So we really, when we think about, first we think about what era we're in, and we start to get into, okay, what are some of the key historical moments that we can somewhat be adjacent to, that we can start to build ideas around and lore with even in the map. So we globetrot, we start to plot down, okay, here are some things narratively from a story level that we can do. But then from a map level, here's some things that really tether into that. So that's kind of like a first and foremost is getting aligned with creative and where they want to go with the story. And specifically within a map context. Then we get into just reference gathering, really kind of setting the tone of what this environment's about. So that's through mood boards, that's through developing style guides. And then from there, once we kind of have like a broad stroke of what the experience is going to be like, talk with designers, get designers on board. Designers will start to also, while they're in their parallel thing, they're working through what are the core beats of the experience. Is this going to be a long range engagement? Is this going to be more of a close quarter type of experience? So we really try to, they get all jazzed up about what they're doing and we do with the art. And then at that point, when they have their ideas of some of the design beats, we have our visual beats, and then we kind of start to marry those together and really overlap how we can complement one another. Once we have that kind of initial foundation set with design and art, we really start to get into actual concepting, really looking at when the player starts a map. What are like, there's a design requirement, what they need to see first. They need to know our games, and this is known knowledge, but with Call of Duty, we have on average a typical 3-lane strategy. So when you land into the map, or when you start into a map, you see what are your options ahead of you, and the time to kill is very short. So we really try to present that information very clearly to the player. And what we have to do from an art direction side is make sure, okay, we have 3 different options. How do we visually distinguish between those 3 different options? And then, how do we also visually guide the player in that direction that's not going to interfere with clarity of being able to see the players?
In my head, I'm visualizing that as like, it's an airplane lane, and there's the lights on the both sides, and there's somebody like, run here, this is where you should go.
SA-841, clear to land. Clear to land. GA-950, punch it.
But how do you do that without airplane lines and somebody who is like directing you? Like, what are the key things that allows, like, just as you said, creating that like where to guide the player?
There's a couple of, one, it's with thematic of the map that we look into. So for instance, you might have one area that is like an alleyway, another area that's straightforward that you have to go straight down the thoroughfare, which is like the main corridor, and then another area where you're going through a building. So now you have those 3 different visual distinctions, and then we play with not only the prop and the set design, but we play with the color, we play with the lighting, to really try to denote those type of experience. Because when you're a player in a Call of Duty experience, art needs to complement what is happening in the map. so that a player knows how to signal, I am going this way, or I'm getting attacked from this area, or come over to this area. And they need to know, okay, I'm by, the pizza area, or I'm in the marketplace, or I'm by, the, Hydro Collider or something like that. So we really try to make sure they're very distinguishable, something that people can read very quickly and be able to communicate to each other very quickly. So art has to really highlight that for them.
Is there any special tech that you guys use or could be used in maps creation that could speed it up?
Just because we have our own proprietary tools, so there's not a lot of that we grab from online just to help speed up the process. But there are, obviously, for each discipline, there are different tools that they use, either through textures that they can download or materials. But when it comes to actually physically blocking out the map or getting it together, what we do within because we have a large depot of content that we actually pull from. What we do as art directors, we start with our concept artists, and we actually pull a lot of basically kick-bash assets, and we either pull those directly from the depot on average, or we might pull them from something possibly online, but then we don't use them in the concept. Ultimately, we try to make things as much as possible for also legal reasons.
But if you're a studio and you're like, okay, I need to create a ton of maps, what are the custom tools that you think people should build in first place that really, really speed up the production or make it less friction? So
there are, and my tech artists probably totally stab me for this, but there's the tech artists actually help us with regards to procedural tools and being able to block out the map. There's those tools directly at say Activision and Treyarch. Those get really developed internally, and how they actually develop them and working with the engineers. But those, we use them to actually block out all of our trees, block out all of our vistas, block out all of our first pass at our map.
So it's like some procedural tools like Houdini and stuff?
Yeah, we have used Houdini for effects and to kind of get some of that going. We also use Houdini for actual some asset population, but it's one of those things where we will use them to help along, but we really try to. It's a lot of grunt work to actually get stuff going, get stuff into the game.
Looking back, what are the production pitfalls that you found in the process, and then you were like able to fix that, and yay, now it is smoother and faster.
So fine, so smooth.
Some of the production pitfalls was basically understanding level of scope of the map. We typically look at a map and we kind of shoot for the stars, and then everything is somewhat custom, we really try to make things bespoke. But as we, over time, realizing that these maps, we have a lot of maps, we start to get, especially throughout DLC, we start to have a lot of maps. We really start to look into how do we actually streamline that process with regards to when do we actually need to go into a detail phase of detailing out a map, or just staying in a blockout phase for such a longer time. And that allows design, because the minute we start to get into detailing, it's harder for designers to then go through and make adjustments. So we really try to be more buttoned up so that artists are not redoing work constantly. So one, it's just how do we actually go through the development process was a big, every game we're getting better at that. How do we actually look into developing skins, look into developing the weapons and all of that as well, and trying to be more down the line of what we're actually going to develop versus we used to use a lot of analytics to kind of adjust from time to time. And now we're being more predictive, more prescriptive of what we're trying to do. So you'll see that in some of our content, starting actually on like Cold War, where there was a thematic that kind of overarched our experience. And because of that, we were able to really plan in advance how we want to develop content, from our front-end UI to our characters in the game to the maps that we're going to create.
It sounded to me like it starts with designers, then goes into designers blocking out the levels, and then using your procedural tools and setting up trees and all of the like kind of support stuff. And then the artists, like level artists, doing a pass based on the kit bash stuff. And then on top of that, what is the custom stuff that needs to be created? Is that the overall process, or what are the gaps? In my understanding,
we definitely have the whole pass of like getting it through and getting it stood up. But then it's just what is missing is actually probably the multiple playtests that we're doing throughout the duration of the project, or throughout the duration of the map. And then that will reveal like, when we're looking at lines of sights, how do we actually refine and make sure there's no noise behind the player, making sure that there's a lot of clarity there. Generally, what you're saying is accurate, but it gets into the more the refinement of the map and of the development of that.
Black Ops 4 was the first game from the franchise which didn't have the single player campaign and included only multiplayer modes, right? Did it impact the design of maps? Like, did it like change the entire thing?
So for Black Ops 4, we also we introduced our first Battle Royale map at that time. So that was our Blackout experience. And that's one I worked on directly as well, where we really wanted to kind of pour into like more of a Battle Royale experience. So not doing the campaign allowed us that opportunity to really focus on this other experience that we felt that the players are actually going to really enjoy, and we can really double down on that. In doing the Blackout now has turned into Warzone, and everyone knows what Warzone is, but it really helped us to really refocus and reprioritize and really actually boost up this new mode that we have that now is stable.
As you mentioned, the Blackout was the first Battle Royale version. I wonder how scary was it to push some new grounds, and like what was behind the idea? Like, did you get a lot of pushback from corporate? Like, I don't know, like, and then also producing something that is absolutely new for a game that has a huge fan base. And we know, like, if you're introducing something, there's going to be a huge hating backlash on everything that you do. Just like a never win. It's like raising children. There's nothing you do is right. There's obviously going to be a trauma.
You do everything wrong.
It started with us as being like a small team of like really, it was me and a couple of like environment artists. When it first started, in our lead level artist / director, it was a very small targeted group, and it was an opportunity to try something new. And for me, that was really exciting. We know how to make the gunplay fun. We understand that. But when we went into this new endeavor, we tried a lot of different things to throw at the wall to see what we can do to reinvent what a battle royale experience. And then we landed on the Blackout experience. And then as being an art director, for me, it was like, how do we present this world that everyone knows Call of Duty as being like this 3-lane experience or zombie experience or campaign experience, but how do we present this information to the player visually? What I really started to work with the guys with is like, how do we lay out, one, the landscape? How we're actually going to guide the player through the map, how we're going to actually help them know what is north, where's all the key destinations within our map. And in that was playing around with the vegetation, playing around with the color, playing around with the lighting. So there's different volumes as you go into different areas. all the effects. And it wasn't until that was the end product. But in the process of that, it wasn't until there's this amazing artist, his name is Andy Livingston. It wasn't until he was playing around one day with one of the engineers. And this is where one of those serendipitous moments happening. You're just like, yes, let's go. And he was working on like a landscape, and we had vehicles in our game, and he started populating the trees and populating the overall terrain. And it was one of those moments where we was like, yeah, we showed it to execs up at Activision. We showed them how far the view distance were. We showed them how just how engagements would look like with bullet drop, how that would actually be with this type of experience. And it was very rudimentary, but it was enough there that everyone was like, yeah.
So it sounds like having like smaller dedicated R&D groups instead of like going all big, all out, and first like finding that visual and finding that fun and iterating small and then going all in is the way to go in those moments, right?
Yeah, because it's so expensive to do it. You know, there was times when we've done things that were like, we went too far, too fast, and spent way too much money and realized, okay, that was not. But this was definitely, it was a ninja group.
How did you know? I'm a ninja.
I found in your portfolio a couple of cinematics for Black Ops Cold War and Warzone specifically. And I was wondering, what's the process for the cinematic part for those kind of projects?
Cold War was actually the kind of the beginning of really starting to lay out what our season content was going to look like. It was like laying out like, hey, taking an extension from the campaign experience, and how do we plot that experience out so it can expand for players to kind of get re-immersed in that throughout the season and have kind of a full character arc, not only that you had in the campaign, but also in experience. And then while we're doing that, onboard all of these new operatives that players have come to love. We kind of worked through multiple iterations of really kind of trying to find what our narrative tone is going to be for the experience, and how do we actually sell things without selling them? How do we actually highlight the attributes of the character, the attributes of the gun that they're going to experience, but not put it in front and center? So that was also this balancing act that we were trying to do while telling a compelling story, because each season wrapped up one arc, but it tethered to an overall experience.
You just mentioned about, the gear and the weapon, and like I was wondering when creating the gears, the costumes, all of that stuff, are you like actually consulting with military personnel, or visit like shooting ranges to figure out weapon behaviors? Anything that you could share that you could recreate that experience without actually going to the army?
The one thing that's really great about Treyarch, they try to keep us grounded with regards of like people that actually worked or served. And for one project, we had, I think Aller North, I think that's his name, come in to really help us understand like what the stakes were and kind of really give us a good sense of that. But moving forward now, what we do, we scan a lot of our materials in. We scan a lot of our props in, more so with weapons. We use things that we can take some of those textures and change them up.
Do you use like external studio for that, or you build your own entire rig for scanning?
Yeah, we have our own, like, those guys are amazing. The character artists and the weapon artists, like the leads over there, they are, they're pretty amazing. And they set up a rig for us, and it's actually within Treyarch to be able to scan and do all that stuff. We do have other outsourced agencies to help us scan things. because we can't fly all over the world. But specifically with the weapons, we use a lot of them gets designed internally, and then we scan what we need. And working with these guys have been around for years, so they know guns in and out.
Yeah, and if anyone wants to learn more about photogrammetry and scanning environments, we had an episode with Chris Matthews, who recently joined 343 as an art director. So feel free to learn more. I wonder if people who like play Call of Duty, if they dropped in a military setting, can be like, okay, I kind of know like 70% of the stuff that needs to be done.
We look into our animations, and we actually we use for our animation, because everything's mocap, and we get people that actually know how to handle guns. They've been in the military, so they understand how to check, how to cover. So we use all of that knowledge and data to actually inform. So that's why when you're playing our game, you get that experience, you understand that. And then visually, the way the characters, reload and all that, like we spend a lot of time.
Call of Duty is a pretty set world. Doing any changes in something that works is scary and can cost millions or sometimes billions of dollars, right? So I wonder, on a project like that, how do you pitch? How do you allow your creativity to flow? Like, how does that work?
Working with the narrative team, we have to go in and we have to, as artists, we have to pitch our ideas to the creatives, like the stakeholders, and really try to help them understand why we're making the decisions we're making. But on average, what happens is they're like, hey, we trust that you're going to be able to push this forward. So our job kind of goes into really making sure we highlight the design elements, but at the same time, put in the elements that we think really kind of sells the vision from our perspective.
I always wondered, because if we look at Call of Duty, and there's like a zombie mode and a battle royale mode and a bunch of other things that are going on, but the environment experience still stays the same. Because you mentioned earlier that, the art drives like where you need to go and where you need to do, right? But then when you're also having multiple experiences in the same environment, how do you make it universal?
Yeah, that's a great question. There are some overlaps between the different modes, but most of the time they're kind of bespoke experiences. Like you can see in a zombie experience, we'll have like you're fighting in a castle, you're fighting. And in multiplayer, we don't have that because of just whatever constraint we have. So, but when they do overlap, because there are those times that they do overlap, there is typically we try to change them in such a way, because each mode, you're getting something different out of the experience. So in a zombie mode, it's not about the 3 different lanes. It's not about that. So we don't need to highlight that. What we need to highlight more is the actual, like the intensity of the experience, the lore, what's happening in it. So we layer some of that on top of what's there and downplay some of the other stuff when there's overlap with Matt.
I feel like the industry in general have been taking like a really good stand to both from the game's perspective and the hiring perspective on support diversity. We look into Last of Us where, we have gay main characters. A lot of studios taking a really big stand towards like hiring diverse, but also setting up the culture that is diverse and promotes that. I was wondering what has been your experience? How has it shifted 10, 15 years ago to like where you're at now? And if you're building a studio from a ground up, like how can you, what are the tips and the tricks that you can give the other studios that could help promote that?
I guess when I first started, it's just one of those ones where you're sitting around, you realize like, oh, you're one of the only like minorities, either even male, woman, male, female, person of color, or something like that. And over time, definitely that has started to shift in a good way, in a positive way. However, specifically for someone like me in the position I'm in, I definitely take more of an active role of really evangelizing, like getting other textures in the game. I feel like if you're not representing your player base right, you're doing them a disservice. So being able to make sure we have other characters with different genders, and even other ethnicities is like vital. And I really try to push that through. And what, in the way we go about doing that is when talking with the narrative folks, they're starting to develop what the characters are going to be or what the experience is going to be. And we try to insert at that moment of like, okay, is it important that this character is white? Or isn't it important that this character is whatever? And then we have that discussion. And that starts to shape what the actual lineup is going to be. For me, with regards to hiring, we just got to get better at practices. I live in California, so a lot of our candidates are kind of from the neighboring areas, especially like entry level people are from the neighboring areas. And specifically for me is looking into some of these HBCUs, looking into some of these other experiences that people are not typically being promoted from. And that goes into talking to recruiters to have them reach out. You have to be proactive in order to kind of move the ball in that regards. So some of those things are what I'm doing. And specifically for me right now, I don't have HR, don't have any of that. So it's been really kind of scouring like who are some good talent across the diaspora and really trying to see how they align to the vision and also giving them an opportunity. So,
well, Shaun, thank you so much for coming and bringing and sharing your wisdom with us. I feel like I've learned so much, and I hope all the other folks as well.
Thank you. Thank you so much. This has been an amazing opportunity. I feel like Ricky Bobby, where I'm like, what do I do with my hand?
I'm not sure what to do with my hands.
Be good just to hold them down by your side. Yeah, great.
I have the same, and also, I'm very excited to learn more about the new studio, and hope our next episode with you gonna be about this new cool stuff that you guys gonna announce everywhere over Venture Beat, Gamma Sutra, and all of that stuff. So, thank you, Shaun, for coming.
Thank you. Thank you.